Pokemon Sun and Moon is hiding even more buffs. This is pretty ridiculous. So on my B-Barrel buff video, there was this comment, top comment by a huge margin. Dunsparce gets Air Slash and Dragon Rush. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together that Dragon Rush was a 7th generation exclusive move when we saw it in Fan Fridays, but there we go. Furret gets Coil and Agility, Butterfree gets Air Slash, and then also there was another comment, Delcatty with the Normalize up by 20%, and then someone else was talking about how Slacking gets Play Rough now, except Slacking was actually in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but not X and Y, so it's pretty ridiculous that the changes list keeps getting deeper and deeper as more people find like the little bits and pieces. I think I knew about the Butterfree getting Air Slash, and I might have mentioned that at some point. And there's another comment that says Blossom gets Quiver Dance. Let's go and look at all of these a bit more in depth. So as we can see right here, 7th generation, Dragon Rush and Air Slash on the Dunsparce. It's pretty much just Air Slash and Dragon Rush. The weird thing is, with all the changes that were just listed off, it doesn't feel like there's too much of a massive change to the way the Pokemon plays. That Rock Slide is going to be the best thing on Dunsparce by far, because it is a 30% chance to flinch both opponents. I guess in singles, Air Slash is going to be slightly better for pure flinching. Problem is, but you don't have the damage anymore, and Coil at least boosts your attack to potentially work with Rock Slide. It'd just be for a 95% accuracy move instead. Dragon Rush also has a chance to flinch, but it's only 20%, so it's kind of like coverage-ish weird things coming out of the Dunsparce right there, and then the 6th generation just kind of shows, yep, didn't have it. As weird as it is, it's like, oh, by the way, we do have those changes right here. The Butterfree also just kind of showing, yep, Tailwind kind of randomly tagged on near the end of its moveset right there, but we don't see any of it, and also Tailwind looks like it got pushed back to level 41 instead of the level 30 in the 6th generation. But Air Slash is one that feels like should have been on Butterfree the entire time because it is a stab-based move. So we're going to check that one out in Pokemon Showdown when we get to that point. Furret. I don't know how to feel about Furret getting Coil and Agility because I think that most of these were just stylistic choices that kind of make sense. That Air Slash and Dragon Rush on Dunsparce kind of pad out its identity a little more, and maybe does it signal a future evolution or something? Like, everyone wants to see something dragon-based on the Dunsparce, like a Mega Evolution or Evolution that, becomes this mad dragon Pokemon. It doesn't just get, like, looked down upon anymore. It becomes a serious threat, but it doesn't really work on Dunsparce in its current state. And Agility and Coil, like, as a ferret Pokemon, you imagine that it can coil and do, like, loopy, spaghetti-like ferret things, so I guess the Furret does benefit from that. And then Agility feels like something that should have been on it the entire time. Problem is, in Fan Fridays, we've seen that the most effective way of using Furret is going to be Follow Me, support with Helping Hand, and then some other stuff. So I don't really see where the Agility takes it to the next level, but again, we're going to kind of look a little deeper with all these things when we get to the Pokemon Showdown part of this video. And then as we can see right here, yep, no Agility, no Coil in the 6th generation. Now we're going to get to the interesting one right here with the Slacking. So Slacking has it learn Play Rough as a Slack Off, and this was introduced in the 6th generation. So I can show you this right here on the level up chart, which means if we just change the camera region around, there's also another really interesting part to this, that Poochyena and Mightyena get Play Rough in their Learn set. However, it was an Egg move in the 6th generation, and I feel like the Egg move was actually pretty easy to accomplish because the Dex Nav made it to where you can counter wild Pokemon with their Egg moves. That was like one of the coolest features about the Dex Nav, and we don't have that anymore in the 7th generation, so it kind of adds a little bit of frustration, and they just learn Play Rough now instead. And then Slack Off, as we can see right here, 6th generation, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire only. There were actually a few changes to different Pokemon that were just Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire only, which means that if we get Pokemon Stars or whatever remake, sequel version we're going to see for Pokemon Sun and Moon, whenever that decides to come out, for whatever console it decides to come out for, as that kind of unfolds, we might actually see a couple more moveset, maybe even base stat total changes coming to these Pokemon. And it does kind of bring in a bigger question is, why does Pokemon not do patches then? That, X and Y could have just patched in Play Rough on the Slack Off instead of just giving it to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. So some interesting decisions overall. We can see that there are also some overlooked ones in general. Then we have this right here, Normalize. So normalized buff doesn't really do much, only Skitty and Delcatty get it, so unless you find a way of putting normalize onto another Pokemon via skill swap, and then using that 20% power boost while also getting stab, I don't really see normalize doing much. It seems like this was meant to bring it in line with Pixelate, Aerialate, and since Galvanize is now an ability, I guess they just said, okay, let's kind of just consolidate everything and make it to where it all thematically makes sense. So again, just kind of showing that these are more thematic changes that kind of make the Pokemon look cool instead of actually getting huge competitive tweaks like Mantine did or Pelipper or some of the other Pokemon that got moveset buffs and actual stat buffs. I think Frostlass with Will-O-Wisp is still something that needs to be a bit more explored. And yeah, play rough. This is just kind of showing Poochyena and Mightyena. It was in the egg move for previous generations, for Generation 6. But now it's time to hop on over to Pokemon Showdown. So the reason why I don't feel Delcatty got that much of a buff out of it, 20% on a 65 base attack Pokemon. Also, Delcatty did get a stats buff in the 7th generation as well. Now has a 90 base speed instead of a 70 base speed. So if you're looking at this and says, wait, 90 doesn't seem right, I thought Delcatty had 70, it did get buffed, so it actually got double buffed in Pokemon Sun and Moon, but we're still not really seeing it too much. Again, the normalize doesn't really work with the 65 attack. Then even if you have like Choice Band and you're normalizing things, it's not going to really add much. Now the 90 base speed, kind of interesting, because if you're going against like 7th generation Pokemon, they're generally slower. So if the meta slows down a bit, then Delcatty can find some opportunities to be more successful at 90 base speed. But it's still a very frail Pokemon that doesn't really get to do too much. Other than that, looking at the Dunsparce changes, again, like 65 special attack isn't really going to do too much to the Air Slash, and 70 attack even means that a super effective Dragon Rush, even with +1 the coil, as we saw in the Fan Fridays, doesn't really do much either. It's just kind of like fun things to make Dunsparce feel like a dragon, so I guess that's pretty cool. Looking at the Furret, agility has options, but just not on the Furret. That a 90 base speed Pokemon could actually go completely uninvested in speed, use that agility, which means it gets that extra bulk for defenses, so it kind of buys itself a turn by investing into hit points instead, and then it can max out an offensive stat. Unfortunately, 76 attack, even with Adamant Nature, not really going to be too massive. Keen Eye is about all that Furret gets, so it can kind of anti-evasion setup, but with Z moves now and like kind of the nerfs to evasion that have happened over the last couple generations, not really as needed. So again, it's kind of like an identity thing. Yeah, agility kind of makes sense, and Furret sounds pretty cute if it uses Coil as a move and just kind of like goes into a floofy little noodle ball, but that's kind of all I see out of it. Getting 64 defense, a boost with Coil, doesn't really get you too much, and I think that it's just really good as a follow me Pokemon, like we saw in the Fan Fridays, to do a couple of sneaky things. So in doubles, it's not going to find as much usage for the agility and the coil. That's just kind of a thing. Blossom, though, I think Blossom might be worth looking into, because that Quiver Dance plus Sleep Powder, and then you can Moonblast Giga Drain, and Blossom is a bulky Pokemon overall. Biggest problem with Blossom is that speed is super low. That even with a timid nature, maxing out speed, +1 speed from one Quiver Dance is not going to do crap for you, so you're kind of stuck on that, and then you have an okay special attack that isn't being invested. Now, +2 special attack off of those Quiver Dances is kind of where things change, but you have to eat 2 hits before you start outspeeding, and if you don't one-shot on the Moonblast Giga Drain, then you're pretty much dead anyway. So Blossom does kind of struggle a bit off of that. Now, Chlorophyll. So singles or doubles Sunny Day is kind of where Blossom can make the most use out of Quiver Dance, because Blossom is surprisingly tanky. I mean, 95 defense, 100 special defense, that's a bit ridiculous. So you can even run a Modest Nature with like max hit point investment, and now you're really tanky. Like, this will be an easy 3-hit KO Pokemon against a lot of fairly strong Pokemon as well, as long as you're not eating super effective hits. Now, as a grass type Pokemon, you're going to see a lot of super effective hits, but if you can maintain that Chlorophyll and you can get the Quiver Dance, Giga Drain back up to full, or get a high amount of health off the Quiver Dance, or at least outspeed into a Sleep Powder, and then get the extra Quiver Dance, and then get some more Giga Drain, that's going to look pretty solid. But then it's also going to show that once Chlorophyll wears off, it's still going to be kind of unless you have high speed investment, but then you're not giving as much from the bulk of the Blossom. So kind of, you can play it 2 ways. You can either use that Quiver Dance like, yo, I'm Quiver Dancing, I'm gaining special defense anyway, so if they have special attackers and you outspeed a Chlorophyll into 1 or 2 Quiver Dance, the speed isn't going to be the most important thing about the Blossom. It's going to be the damage and the tankiness, which also means that you could go for some higher defensive investment if you just want to play it like a tank that has Quiver Dance, and then Sustain on the Giga Drain will eventually pay off for you. And as long as you're putting your opponent down with Sleep Powder, that could also turn into some other opportunities. Unfortunately, 75% accuracy on the Sleep Powder, not the most reliable, but Sleep Powder actually boosts the speed stat by 1 stage. So it is like Z Hypnosis, and in my Z Hypnosis like breakdown video, people did mention, yo, Z Sleep Powder kind of more broken-ish, because yeah, some Pokemon can make use of it, but they're already pretty fast, or they already have Quiver Dance, so I don't really see the speed boost working in a lot of scenarios, but it could be something if you want to get that Blossom going a lot faster. That if you are running speed investment on the Blossom, well then use Z Sleep Powder, Quiver Dance, and now you're at your +2 on the speed, and then you can Quiver Dance, Outspeed for Giga Drain, and Moonblast as you need to for the rest of the coverage. On the non-Z move Blossom, I don't know what you could run. And as newbie as it sounds, Wide Lens question mark, that even though it's a 10% boost, at least puts you over 80% on a Sleep Powder, so you can be a lot more crucial on the Sleep Powder. If you are going bulk investment though, then that might be the opportunity to go for one of your Wiki Berries or some kind of Confusion Berries, and leftovers Citrus Berry would be a little more reliable. So I think Citrus Berry if you want to play for reliability, Wiki Berry if you just want to go for that burst healing after +1 or +2 on the Quiver Dance, and now you're going to be a bulky Pokemon. Just surprisingly tanky overall, and then you're still healing a lot off of the Giga Drain. So instead of running, like, the problem is also 5 move slot syndrome, that you don't get to run the Synthesis, but also if you have the Wiki Bear, it's like a free Synthesis inside of your setup. So the Blossom plays do get a bit more complex, and you don't necessarily need the Chlorophyll 100%. Healer doesn't really do anything in singles though, so maybe Sunny Day, just like quick little buff up and then try to make it work from there. And then the last one to talk about is Butterfree. So, Butterfree getting Air Slash, it's also a pretty weird one, because Sleep Powder plus Compound Eyes is already really good on Butterfree. You eat a hit, Focus Sash procs, and then you use your Sleep Powder, and then you go for like +2 on Quiver Dance and try to one-shot them on a boosted Bug Buzz with like a Modest Nature or something. So Butterfree can get into those situations, but I don't see where Air Slash adds anything unless you want to roll that RNG. If Bug Buzz isn't going to kill anything, and if you can convert a 2-hit KO like Air Slash into Bug Buzz or double Air Slash, then the only time it's useful is hoping that you get the 30% chance to flinch, otherwise you're at 1 hit points and then you're going to die anyways. But Butterfree doesn't find itself in those situations either, because if you get a KO, well then you just Sleep Powder the next Pokemon coming in. You already have +2 on the Quiver Dance, so you outspeed, Sleep Powder, 2-shot them, Sleep Powder, 2-shot them, Sleep Powder, 2-shot them, and then that's how you win games. So really, I think right now with Toxapex and just the amount of poison Pokemon, having Psychic coverage is going to be better on the Butterfree, so Psychic Bug Buzz is kind of what people go towards. Sometimes you see the Energy Ball, and I think that Butterfree is done fine without Air Slash. It doesn't add more damage than Bug Buzz, it's really just that chance to flinch while they're already asleep. So I think that these are more just aesthetic things. Oh, Bug Flying Pokemon should have Bug Flying Dual Stab, right? It just didn't make sense for Butterfree to not have Air Slash, even though it's not that useful. Same for pretty much all of the other tweaks that we've seen up to this point. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I don't even know if there's any more to talk about at this point, but it's interesting. Like, I wonder if we're going to get even more buffs, even in, like, the sequel version or the next generation of Pokemon. Because there was, like, a huge overhaul for a lot of things in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Unfortunately, it didn't feel like it balanced too much. A lot of Pokemon that got buffed didn't really get picked up and go even crazier. I think Mantine might be one of the bigger success stories. Pelipper, anything. Okay, so it's weather abilities. Anything outside of weather abilities didn't really feel like it got enough to become hyper viable, because then we have like outrageously overpowered Pokemon like the Ultra Beast and the Tapus come in, and then they raise the power creep so high that the other Pokemon, even with the buffs, weren't able to keep up so much. So I'm wondering, like, if there's going to be some major reworks, if there's going to be some major overhauls. I thought the Alolan Pokemon were going to be another shot at viability, and it doesn't seem to have really worked out as well. I might do a video just talking about, like, overall balance and how it didn't work, instead of just kind of adding another 10 minutes to this video or whatever. But there we go, guys. Hope you all enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.